Silicon Valley Western Chapter. My name is Pablo Jodar, and today I'm honored to have here with me Chris Elve from Arcades and also Nicola Masella from Storm. Chris is running a startup focused on the tokenization of art, and he will explain us in just a minute what it is about, and really looking forward to it. And then Nicola is an expert on the legal field. He's based in Switzerland. Chris is also based in Switzerland. And today the idea is to bring two experts to explain what blockchain is and the applicability of blockchain to real projects. Because in the past weeks we have heard about cryptocurrencies and also blockchain technology, but sometimes I feel that we don't really know what the technology is and how can we apply it to real projects. So with that, I'll pass it to Chris, who will explain us what Arcades is, what are you doing, and how you are gonna revolutionize the art industry.
Yeah, thanks, Pablo. First of all, congratulations on the idea for a tokenization channel. I think that's really needed, and a lot of people are asking me and in the community, but also more and more outside of the traditional community, what are tokens, what are we doing there? And so I think it's great to do that. So as you may know, the art industry is a traditional industry. Art itself is an asset class that is very highly sought after in many ways. It's a pretty big market. 2018, we're talking about $65 billion. But one thing about the art market is that it's highly illiquid. Art as an asset class is not liquid. Yes, you can transport art. It is certainly more liquid or more transportable than, let's say, real estate. But still, a lot of the art that we have today is either in private collections or even here in Geneva. Many people don't know that. It's one of the biggest art collections. In fact, in the Freeport here in Geneva, and a lot of art just sits there and cannot be really traded easily. Now, Arcades has as its goal and as its business the tokenization of art. So what we're doing is we're creating custom tokens for artwork so that this art can become a more liquid asset class, and it has a number of other advantages that we can perhaps discuss as well. But the primary reason we're doing is really we want to go into the art market and really be a disruptive force there and bring a lot of dynamism, new dynamics into the art market with that, and open up the market also for a lot of services on platforms and so on and so forth. But for that, you really need to go into the digital world, and that's what we're trying to do, bridge that gap.
Thank you. Definitely, it's a really impressive business, and I'm impressed how the revolution or the digital transformation is arriving to every sector, even in art that traditionally has been quite close industry. So I think you have a lot to add by implementing this tokenization of art and giving exposure of these pieces of art to the broad market. And with that, I would like to ask you, how are you gonna articulate all this tokenization? How does your token work? And also, what's the connection between the digital world and the traditional world?
That's a great question. I think that specifically the last part, right? When you talk about tokens, they're representing something in the physical world, in this case. But it's not quite clear how that works, right? Especially when you talk about art versus, let's say, real estate. Real estate, you can't really move a house away, and you can say this really refers to that particular building. Right. However, a piece of art, you could maybe think of just switching it out, right? And what does the token refer to? So what's really important is actually, in order to create a token that's credible and trusted, you have to first create a very good and solid cyber physical system, or people call it digital twins. Which is something that is coming from the Internet of Things world and is well established. So there's a lot of technology. There's technology stacks for that already available. So what we're doing really is we're taking IoT technology on one side and tokenization technology, blockchain technology on the other side, and we're bringing this together in order to create those unique, you would say like super highly non-fungible tokens, right? So to really be sure that we have a unique reference on the actual work, and there are several ways to do that, and some of that is actually our core, protected technology as well.
Right. You just mentioned a non-fungible token, which is a concept that is quite new. So maybe Nicola can help us with the definition of a non-fungible token and what is the implication from a legal perspective.
Sure. So if you take as example Bitcoin or other main crypto assets, they are all fungible tokens. So one Bitcoin, of course, is like one another. Non-fungible tokens are completely different. Every token is unique and in this case represents a unique object. This is not so what does it mean? It doesn't mean that you cannot fractionate this token and sell some fractions of it, but the token itself, when you have the 100% of it, should correspond to, for example, in this case, a digital asset correspond to a physical asset. And so if you have an art piece, of course, an art piece is different from another, and you can represent it as a non-fungible token.
Good. So if I understand well, a non-fungible token is something that represents a unique asset or thing and cannot be replaced by another thing. So it has its own identifier. So in that sense, Chris, I assume that you are designing these non-fungible tokens in order to guarantee security and transparency to your customers. So could you please elaborate more on the advantages and hurdles that you have found during your journey? Because I think when you started, the regulation was one thing, but now things are changing. We have the European Union and the SEC already regulating and issuing some documents saying that they want to have these crypto assets circulating. So what's your experience on that?
Yeah. So yeah, you're touching on a very important point. So the two big challenges in the field really for us are, on the one side is really the like you say, it's the regulatory aspects, and I think Nicola can fill us in later maybe a little bit about that, because that's really a key aspect. And it is true that the acceptance in the last 2 or 3 years has fundamentally changed. I mean, the discussions are completely different. People have heard about it. They're interested in it. There's a lot to do in terms of education, but it is something that really changes. Regulation for us, in fact, is not a dirty word. I mean, it is sometimes, it can be burdensome, but on the other side, you really need a perspective. You need to, in order to invest, in order to for ourselves, but also for investors, you need to have some kind of a predictability in the field, right? And I need to know what I can do with my assets, with my digitized assets in the future. So that's a really, really important thing, and I'm very happy to see that we're moving forward. I'm not happy with every aspect of it, and sometimes it's a little heavy and so on, but still, it's in principle a good thing. The other side that you also mentioned, of course, is the technology, and there's not one technology that we're using. The main part is to design specifically for use cases, right? And it's not just about tokenizing art for the sake of tokenizing, or even for fractional ownership. That's one of the use cases, but it can, in terms of advantages, like you mentioned, it can go beyond that. It's the transparency, it's the traceability, but you can even go beyond that, and you can implement oracles into those tokens. You can have information come in, for instance, pricing information of, let's say, comparable works that are being auctioned. The token can know about itself, for instance, its value. You can have, if the artwork is in a museum, you can have views literally fed in there, and so on and so forth. What we're really also aiming for is to have services that can be offered to those tokens, like insurance, for instance, in this case, a very important thing. And services then they're also adaptable, right? In the sense that if the artwork sits in a bunker, it's less at risk. If it's being loaned on an exhibit, it is more at risk, and you can those kinds of adjustments can be made easily in this way. So creating a marketplace there is also like one of the long-term aims.
Yeah, this is a huge transformation, because having this token with this information is something that right now we cannot have. So I think Arcades in this case is making the market more transparent and is giving more information to customer when it comes to buy the asset, and hence more protection, which I think every investor wants when they are investing or buying this type of assets. And in terms of regulation, I'll go back to you, Nicola. What's the current situation here in Switzerland and also in other jurisdictions like Liechtenstein that recently approved the Blockchain Act? How they are recognizing this token? What's the classification of the token?
Okay, so it's not really an easy question, because regulation when it comes to crypto asset is quite a complex topic. Let's say that at international level, it all started with the AML and KYC. So basically the problem that all jurisdictions pose in the first place is to identify the people involved in this market. Only in a second moment, they started regulated crypto assets itself and started defining what's their economical function, and so also their juridical qualification. Switzerland actually was one of the first countries to do so, but not with the law, just with the guidelines published by FINMA, which divided the crypto assets into three main categories that are the well-known payment tokens, utility tokens, and security tokens. Liechtenstein did a step forward, let's say. In January 2020, it enacted this Blockchain Act that is actually made for the purpose of tokenization. So with this law, provide a quite consistent legal framework for the tokenization of assets. And also I can explain more about it, but the point is to build a legal framework dedicated only to it. Switzerland, for example, in this moment did a different thing. In the last part of January, it will enter into force this new law adapting the Swiss regulatory framework, like the old regulatory framework, adapting it to DLT. So introducing the possibility of having on DLT, for example, the equity of a company, debit obligations. Liechtenstein's approach was completely different. We are not introducing DLT and blockchain in every aspect of our legal framework, but we are designing a legal framework specific for DLT.
Okay, understood. So basically, countries are still wondering or investigating what the technology is, and they are not agreed yet on the category they are gonna give to these tokens, right?
There is discussion in this regard, in particular if you look at the United States. But let's say that countries also in other matters, they follow different regulatory approach. The Liechtenstein approach is one, could be seen as preferable or not with regard to others, but is a matter of choice in the end, if you want to be more favorable or not to a specific usage of DLT technology and crypto asset.
Okay, understood. And regarding the MIKA regulation that everyone is talking about on crowdfunding and that is meant to create a new milestone on the crowdfunding because it's going to incorporate this tokenization process. What's your view on that, and when can we expect to have it approved, and if it's going to allow companies like maybe Arcades in the future can do a crowdfunding campaign to raise funds to acquire this paint, for instance? So what's your opinion on that?
Okay, let's say two things. The MIKA regulation is part of a digital finance package published by the European Commission, which involves not only the MIKA regulation, but another regulation, which is on a pilot regime for market infrastructures using DLT technologies. Why I say this? Because MIKA regulation does not involve all the crypto assets that are financial instruments. So basically it involves payment tokens and utility tokens. Then there is a separate proposal for security tokens. So it creates a quite sound regulatory regime, let's say, but it's basically regulating ICOs, is imposing some obligation on the publication of the white paper, on the information that should be inside the white paper, and on the, of course, for the protection of consumers and investors. Although using the word investors in this regard is a bit tricky because they are not investors from a legal point of view. They're investors only in the case of security tokens. Regarding equity crowdfunding and crowdfunding in general, there is another European regulation that will enter into force soon to pursue equity crowdfunding campaigns in which you award the participants with crypto assets is possible in some European countries. It depends on the implementation of the European crowdfunding regulation. It depends on how these regulations are implemented by the countries, and also with regard to their civil law legal framework.
Okay, thank you for your insight on that. I think it's really important to understand the difference between a security token, an equity token, a payment token. And for those in the audience that maybe after this podcast want to start their own company on tokenization, what would be the best way to do it in order not to have problems in the future? Because recently we saw that the SEC is going after Ripple, and it was a big news. It got by surprise, I think, the crypto atmosphere, and the price went down, and now Ripple is saying that they have an army of lawyers and they are gonna turn around the situation. But the reality is that right now Ripple has a bad reputation in that sense. So we could see that also here in Europe, that maybe we start our company classifying our tokens, or like Arcade, maybe you classify your token as a equity token or utility token, and then the regulators come and say, no, this is a security token. What's the way to prevent that?
Of course, for example, if a country follows the approach that Switzerland follows, you can have a dialogue with the regulator and address in the first place this problem. So you can also obtain a document of the regulator in which the regulator sets some conditions that you must respect in order not to be qualified as a security. But the point is really to select the jurisdiction in which your project is more consistent with the legal framework. So you have really to do a regulatory assessment of your business model and understand which jurisdiction fits best for your needs.
Okay, so it's more case by case thing rather than having a standard framework or jurisdiction where to start the project, no?
At the current point in time, you must do this basically to assess what jurisdiction is best for your needs. Maybe in future this will change, as, for example, the European Union is changing its regulatory framework, and probably also the US will. But for now, you have to do, in legal matters, it's called forum shopping. You go in the forum which is best for you.
Yeah. Okay. So I ask you these questions because I think there are many entrepreneurs right now, like Chris, that when they are developing or planning the future of the startup, they find this type of issues. And I think it's good to be advised by a professional lawyer like you, Nicola, and always be collaborating with the regulators in order to prevent potential problems in the future that may tear down the whole project and the whole energy you have invested in the project. No, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think we have a need. I mean, this is a huge business as well for law firms or for even disruptive new service firms like, Nicola is also I understand in a multi-service firm. It's hard to, these days, if you have to go to 25 different people for each aspect of your business, that's really that takes so much time and energy and frankly also money that it's very hard. So you need to have people who understand these things out of the box and are kind of grown up with this in their professional life and understand sort of the logic of the whole thing. In terms of the regulatory, it's true that of course if you have to find sort of your jurisdiction where your stuff actually works and where you don't encounter those kinds of, like I said before, you need to have a little bit of a perspective because, I mean, honestly, how you're going to attract investment as well, right? If that's not answered, if that question is not answered, you can have the best business model in the world, but you're gonna have problems attracting investment as well. So that's a really big issue, and for us also, I mean, we're looking at where do we need to passport the company or part of it, or depending on the use case, what can we do locally, what should we do somewhere else, and it can be frustrating, honestly.
Let me add something regarding Ripple and also the regulatory framework. So Ripple has been a pioneer. It came in the early days of this history, let's say. And so, of course, when they launched their initiative, there was no legal framework for them. Now the situation is different, but also you have to consider the approach of SEC is not really based on dialogue like FINMA. They are more about like punishing, basically, what they found not consistent with the securities law of the United States. Mm-hmm. In a matter like DLT and blockchain, in which the innovation and the technological development is really the core of it, is really detriment such an approach in which you basically want to punish everyone pursuing an innovation. The approach pursued by FINMA, in my opinion, is the best approach because you announce innovation in your country and you also have a dialogue with companies that they can understand what they want to do and what they want to do. I think that in the end, nobody wants to break the law for the purpose of breaking the law. The project of Ripple is legitimate. Maybe they breached some provisions, but for sure was not the intention of their business model.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the SEC is more... they allow projects to be born, and after several years, if they see that it's getting traction and it's getting out of control, then they come and punish you. And that's the difference, I think, from Europe, that is more collaborative in the sense that at the beginning they say, no, you cannot do it. But if you try to collaborate with them and explain them your project and the implications, then they start studying it and they eventually allow you to pursue your project. So in that sense, I think in Europe we have more opportunity to develop these projects and to create these companies like Arcades. And just last question, Nicola, in the interest of time, I would like to hear from you what really a token represents, because I've heard many times on different, and if you speak from lawyers from different countries, a different answer. So a token represents the ownership of this piece of art, or it incorporates the right of ownership. What does it really represent?
It's a tricky question because actually it depends. Not every token is the same. So you can have a token that incorporates the right of ownership for that art piece you have in the studio. But a crypto asset like Bitcoin does not incorporate a claim or a right against anything. So it's properly a new digital asset. So crypto assets actually are composed by different things. Some crypto assets are really new types of assets. Some others are simple, like digital representation of rights or claims that already exist in current regulation. For example, the right of ownership, of course, is more than 2,000 years old. It's come from a Roman law, and you can have it in digital form. In this sense, tokenization is kind of an innovative form of securitization.
Okay. So for all the audience, again, it depends on each project and on each token. So before starting the project, it's good to have this legal advice from professionals like Nicola, in order to develop the right smart contract that represents the right or incorporates the right or whatever it is of the asset you're trying to tokenize. And just to close up and finish with the first episode, I would like to ask you, Chris, at which stage Arcades? What are you looking for, and what's the future? How do you see the future of tokenization of art?
All right. So yeah, in terms of Arcades, we are at the beginning. We have pretty much bootstrapped this, invested our own money and a lot of time, honestly. And so I think we've built a couple of prototypes. We have, I think we know the technology stack pretty well. And we're starting to protect some things as well. That's an important piece as well here. Because obviously, this the idea in principle is not something you can protect, but you can protect the technology. We are very interested in working with partners at this point to develop use cases to demonstrate how this can actually work in the real world, whether it's auction houses, museums, collectors. That's sort of a very important step as well, but we're also starting to look for some serious investment, and maybe this can be even a partnering type of investment where we're looking at somebody who wants to develop something like that with us and then move it from there. But we would like to, once we have a bit of a couple of use cases that we have demonstrated well, I think we're looking to grow pretty aggressively and also use that disruptive force in the market. And speaking of the art market, I think this is. It is still, I think it's not, I wouldn't say lagging behind, and after COVID certainly has shown the art market as well to adapt into a digital sort of space, but what it hasn't really, so it basically transformed in a sense that, viewings are being done virtually, auctions are done virtually, etc. But it hasn't really fundamentally changed the mechanics. And I think the challenge for the art market and the art world is going to be that. And I think there are players out there already who securitize art, fractional ownership, but in general, they're building companies around it and sell the shares in the company, which you could then also, of course, you could tokenize that. But we're looking for something a little bit more native in a sense, and really working with art. It has to be said also that a lot of art today, of course, is digital art to begin with. So there's another strand, another component in there that's interesting, and we're also, of course, interested in the in this borderline between the physical and digital. And I think there's a lot of things are going to happen there, and there's a lot of opportunity. We're, as far as we know, one of the first in the field, but there are others, and I think it's going to be healthy to have really an ecosystem and some healthy competition as well in this area.
That seems really interesting. For me, it was something new because I'm not an expert on the art industry. I didn't know many things about it. So I'm glad to hear that blockchain has also arrived to this industry. I'm glad to having you here today, explaining what are you doing and how you are contributing to this digital revolution. And thank you also, Nicola, for being here today with us. I think it's really important, as I already said, to be advised by a legal advisor like you in these early days of the technology. So I hope we continue in this line of development in terms of regulation. And I hope someday we live in a completely digitalized and tokenized world where everyone can invest and decide where to put their money to work.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
I hope so too, actually.
I wish the best for all of you. And Chris, good luck with your fundraising and also with the project. And I hope to invest soon. Either in this picture or in another one. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pablo, and thanks for the initiative.
And thank you everyone that has been watching us today in this first episode. And I hope you like it and more to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.